Lost and wounded in the freezing mountains, a soldier's final hope flickered as darkness fell. But just when all seemed lost, help arrived in the most impossible way. A wild wolf, drawn by an old debt, emerged from the shadows. No one could believe what happened next, or the secret these two shared from a decade before. The mountains were silent, blanketed in snow that turned the world to stone and shadow. Captain Ethan Cole moved carefully, his every breath sharp with pain. Boots slipping on the icy ridge, his uniform was torn, blood stiff on his sleeve, the echo of gunfire still ringing in his ears. All around him, the wilderness closed in, hostile, cold, indifferent. Ethan had been separated from his unit during a sudden ambush. His radio was dead. The sun had vanished behind iron-gray clouds, leaving him with only a compass and fading hope. He pressed on, refusing to let panic take root, but each step grew heavier as the cold set deeper in his bones. He was trained for survival. He'd spent years in these mountains during peace and war, knew the legends whispered around old campfires, tales of ghosts, spirits and wolves that watched from the trees. But he had never believed in miracles, only in grit. Night fell fast. Ethan found shelter beneath a twisted pine, knees drawn to his chest. He tried to ration the last of his water, but his fingers shook so badly that half of it spilled into the snow. As he fought to stay awake, memories flickered behind his eyes, his daughter's smile, the warmth of home, a time when the world had been simpler. And then, a sound, soft, almost hesitant, caught his ear. A shadow moved at the edge of the firelight, eyes glinted from the darkness, golden and watchful. Ethan tensed, hand reaching for his knife, but the figure did not attack. Instead, it crept closer, body low, fur bristling with caution. A wolf, not just any wolf. Its coat was silver streaked with white, one ear nicked and scarred, a mark Ethan remembered from long ago, though he could barely trust his senses. 10 years earlier, as a young recruit, he had found a wolf pup caught in a poacher's trap not far from this very ridge. Against orders, he'd freed the terrified animal, dressing its wounds and carrying it to safety. He had watched the pup limp back into the forest, never expecting to see it again. Now, impossibly, that same wolf stood before him, older, larger, gaze steady and unafraid. The animal sniffed the air, then, recognizing Ethan's scent, let out a low, familiar whine. For a moment, the soldier forgot his pain, forgot the cold. In the middle of nowhere, with danger all around, he was face to face with a memory made real. Ethan spoke softly. "You remember, don't you, old friend?" The wolf lowered its head, pressing its nose to Ethan's trembling hand. Far below, in the nearest village, the search for Ethan had begun. Helicopters scoured the slopes, radios buzzed with static. His fellow soldiers feared the worst. But up on the ridge, the only help he would find was the one nobody could have predicted. That night, as the wind howled and the stars shivered, the wolf curled its body around Ethan, sharing warmth, guarding him from the darkness. Every so often, the wolf would lift its head, scanning the forest for threats, before settling back beside the man it somehow remembered. As dawn broke, Ethan awoke with the wolf still at his side, the world made softer by their fragile truce. For the first time since the ambush, he dared to believe he might survive. But survival in the mountains comes with a price. Hungry eyes watched from the woods other predators, both animal and human, drawn by Ethan's scent and the traces of blood in the snow. And deep within, a new question began to form. Had fate truly brought the wolf back to him, or was the debt between them only now beginning to be repaid? As Ethan struggled to his feet, the wolf stood with him, muscles tensed. From somewhere far off, voices echoed up the mountain, enemy patrols closing in. Soldier and wolf faced the wild together, knowing their next move could mean life or death for both. Ethan leaned heavily on a fallen branch as he limped along the icy ridge, the wolf padding silently at his side. Every step sent sharp pain up his injured leg, but with the animal there, something deep inside him steeled against despair. He couldn't say why the wolf had returned, not with certainty, but in the endless white hush of the mountains, logic mattered less than survival. Behind them, the rising wind erased their tracks. But ahead, fresh prints dotted the snow. Boot prints, several men, spreading out as they searched. Ethan's pulse quickened. The voices he'd heard in the dawn weren't his rescuers. They were enemy scouts, hunting for any sign of a wounded soldier who might still pose a threat. The wolf seemed to sense the danger. It stopped, ears perked, nose twitching as it read scents the human could barely imagine. Then, without a sound, it slipped away from the path, nudging Ethan to follow. They moved off the main trail, weaving through thick stands of pine and over treacherous rocks, slick with ice. Ethan gritted his teeth, relying on training and adrenaline to push through the pain. The wolf glanced back often, checking that he was still there, its wild eyes shining with a strange mixture of caution and determination. For hours, they traveled this way, climbing higher, deeper into the wilderness. The forest closed in, muffling the distant shouts and crunch of boots on snow. Once, Ethan spotted a glint of metal, binoculars scanning the slope below. He ducked behind a boulder. The wolf pressed close to his leg, both holding perfectly still as danger swept past without seeing them. When at last the forest grew quiet again, Ethan slumped against a tree, breath ragged, his vision swimming. He felt himself fading, the cold clawing into his bones. The wolf returned, carrying something in its jaws, a half-frozen rabbit. It dropped the catch at Ethan's feet, then circled back to sniff the air, ever watchful. Ethan's hands shook as he fumbled with his knife, skinning the animal and eating what little he could, raw but life-saving. Night fell early. The wolf led Ethan to a shallow cave, hidden beneath tangled roots. Together, they curled in the dark, the animal's body heat staving off the worst of the chill. Ethan watched the wolf in the gloom, remembering the day he'd saved that tiny, trembling pup a decade before. Had the animal really remembered all this time? Or was it just fate? Two survivors clinging to each other in a hostile world. Sleep claimed Ethan, but not for long. He awoke to the wolf's low growl, hackles raised. Outside, footsteps crunched in the snow, heavier, slower, as if someone was trying not to be heard. The wolf tensed, and Ethan gripped his knife, his heart pounding. The footsteps stopped. A beam of flashlight sliced through the entrance of the cave. Voices argued in a foreign tongue, angry, frustrated. Ethan pressed himself back, willing himself invisible. The wolf stood between him and the cave mouth, teeth bared in warning. A gunshot cracked through the night, close, deafening in the tight space. The wolf lunged, jaws snapping, as the first soldier appeared in the opening. Ethan's training took over. He tackled the intruder's legs, sending both men tumbling out into the snow. The wolf darted after them, snarling. The other soldiers shouted, firing wildly into the trees, their bullets scattering in panic. In the confusion, Ethan and the wolf broke away, plunging into the forest. Branches whipped against Ethan's face as he ran, the wolf leading him through a maze of shadows and moonlit drifts. They didn't stop until the mountain was silent once more. Ethan collapsed, shaking, exhaustion washing over him in waves. The wolf pressed close, licking a shallow cut on Ethan's hand, eyes bright with a silent promise. "I won't leave you." Ethan drew a shaky breath, realizing he was no longer just a lost soldier. He was a man in debt, to the wild, to the wolf, to the impossible bond that now linked them both. Far below, enemy voices faded, their search growing colder as the night deepened. But Ethan knew the mountain would test them again before morning. As he drifted into uneasy sleep, a new sound broke the quiet, a distant, haunting howl. It wasn't the wolf beside him, but another voice in the darkness. Ethan's companions stiffened, listening. Were they alone after all? Or had something else awakened in the wild, drawn to the bond between soldier and wolf? Ethan jerked awake at the second howl, colder and sharper than the first. The wolf at his side had risen, head lifted, muscles tense as a bowstring. In the mountain hush, the sound seemed to echo forever, an ancient summons, threaded with both warning and longing. For a moment, Ethan felt like a trespasser in someone else's world, dependent on a companion whose loyalties ran deeper than any man's. He strained to listen. The call was answered by his wolf, a low, rolling reply, steady and unafraid. Ethan shivered, unsure if the wolf was calling family, a mate, or a threat. Soon, the distant howl moved closer, joined by the crunch of snow and the whisper of paws. The wolf pressed against Ethan, urging him deeper into the undergrowth just outside the cave. Ethan followed, crouched low, every sense on edge. From the darkness, a pair of eyes flashed. Another wolf. This one darker and leaner, its coat a shadow among the branches. It kept its distance, circling warily, nose twitching as it read the complicated story woven in Ethan's scent. Blood, fear, loyalty, a decade-old promise. The two wolves exchanged a series of growls, whines, and gestures, negotiating the boundaries between stranger and pack, between past and present. Ethan realized with awe that he was witnessing a reunion, or perhaps a reckoning. He watched as his wolf nudged the new arrival, tails wagging low, both wary and hopeful. Suddenly, a branch snapped under Ethan's boot. The new wolf bristled, lips pulling back in a warning snarl. For a tense second, Ethan froze, not daring to move, but his wolf stepped between them, emitting a soft chuff, as if vouching for the human. Slowly, the tension faded. The dark wolf circled, then melted back into the shadows, satisfied, or at least willing to wait. Ethan exhaled, heart pounding. He turned to his companion. "You saved me twice now, old friend." Dawn crept into the sky, painting the snow golden blue. With daylight came new risks. Ethan knew the enemy patrols would not give up so easily. He also knew his wound was worsening, his leg swollen, the pain a constant grinding ache. He'd need help soon, or even a wolf's loyalty wouldn't be enough. The wolf seemed to sense his weakness. When Ethan could barely walk, the animal would slow, waiting patiently, guiding him toward the sound of water, a stream hidden under thick boughs where Ethan drank and washed his wound as best he could. But their trail was not invisible. That afternoon, as Ethan and the wolf picked their way along a narrow ridge, gunfire cracked in the distance. Bullets tore through the trees, splintering bark. Ethan ducked, crawling behind a boulder. The wolf pressed flat beside him. Shouts echoed through the forest. Enemy soldiers, emboldened by daylight, fanned out, closing in. Ethan's heart hammered. He checked his pistol. One round left, hardly enough for a fight. The wolf darted forward, a gray shadow, weaving between the trees. Ethan almost called him back, but then realized this wasn't panic, it was strategy. The wolf let out a sharp bark, drawing the patrol's attention. 3 men peeled off, chasing after the moving target. Ethan used the distraction to crawl through the brush, slipping further down the slope. He winced with every movement, his legs screaming for rest, but he pressed on, determined not to waste the wolf's sacrifice. The ruse worked. By the time the soldiers realized they'd been led in circles, Ethan was gone. The wolf returned, tongue lolling, blood flecked on his coat, not his own, but from a rabbit snatched in the chase. He dropped it at Ethan's feet, resuming his quiet vigil. As dusk approached, the two pressed on, exhaustion settling in. They reached a ravine lined with ancient pines. There, for the first time, Ethan allowed himself to hope. He bandaged his leg, shared the last of his food with the wolf, and let himself rest, trusting the animal to keep watch. Above them, clouds gathered, promising another bitter night. Ethan drifted between sleep and waking, haunted by memories. The trapped wolf pup from years ago, his own lost soldiers, the endless debt between wildness and mercy. Just before sleep claimed him, Ethan whispered, "You saved me because I saved you. But what if we both need saving now?" The wolf nuzzled his hand, eyes glowing in the twilight, as if answering, "As long as we are together, we survive." But in the darkness beyond their camp, unseen eyes watched. The second wolf from the night before, and behind him, another silhouette, a limping figure with a rifle, closing in on the scent of blood and hope. Night deepened, heavy with fog and the lingering scent of gunpowder. Ethan slept in snatches, his dreams broken by the ache in his leg and the uneasy silence between gusts of wind. The wolf stayed close, ears flicking at every sound, muscles taut, torn between the need to protect and the urge to flee. Out in the trees, the second wolf moved silently, sometimes glimpsed in the fire's dying glow, sometimes only a pair of eyes in the undergrowth. Ethan could not tell if it was friend, foe, or something in between. He only knew it was waiting, as if measuring whether the human and his companion deserved to survive this long night. A twig snapped. Ethan jolted upright, hand going for his empty pistol, the wolf tensed, lips curling. In the grey pre-dawn, a human silhouette appeared, a lone figure limping, rifle gripped in white-knuckled hands. For a split second, Ethan's mind raced. Was it a rescuer, or had the enemy tracked them again? The figure called out, voice hoarse and accented, "Don't move! I see you!" Ethan froze, trying to assess his chances. The wolf positioned itself between Ethan and the stranger, fur bristling. The man edged closer, his limp pronounced, face hard and weathered from mountain life. "I know who you are, Captain Cole. There's a price on your head. I take you back. Maybe I live to see my family again." Ethan's heart pounded. "You don't have to do this. There's nothing here but death and cold." The man hesitated, lowering his gun just a little. "You think I want this? They left me behind too. Only thing out here is hunger." The wolf's eyes flicked from Ethan to the stranger and back. The second wolf circled, hidden, watching both men. Suddenly, from the shadows, a growl erupted. The dark wolf lunged from the brush, slamming into the stranger's legs. The rifle clattered into the snow as the man went down, cursing and flailing. Ethan seized the moment. Ignoring the pain in his leg, he crawled forward, grabbing the weapon and kicking it further away. The wounded man struggled, fear and rage twisting his face. But then, as the two wolves stood over him, hackles raised, he stilled. "Go on, finish it," he spat, eyes squeezed shut. Ethan shook his head, breath ragged. "No, we're not killers. Not anymore." The wolves seemed to understand. The dark wolf backed off, watching the man with cold suspicion, but no malice. The silver wolf returned to Ethan's side, nuzzling his shoulder in reassurance. "Why?" the man whispered. "Why spare me?" Ethan met his gaze. "You know what it's like to be left behind. So do they." For a long moment, no one spoke. Finally, the man pulled himself up, nursing his twisted ankle. "If you want to survive, head east at first light. There's a shepherd's cabin just below the pass. It's empty. No one goes there now. You might make it, if the wolves stay with you." Ethan nodded, gratitude and suspicion mixing in his chest. "Why help us now?" The man shrugged. "Debts. We all have them." He vanished into the trees, leaving Ethan, the wolves, and the uncertain dawn. Ethan slumped against a log, the adrenaline crash nearly overwhelming him. The wolves watched the woods, silent guardians once more. As the sun rose, painting the world pink and silver, Ethan limped to his feet, leaning heavily on the wolf at his side. They set off toward the pass, following the directions given by a man who might once have been an enemy, now bound to them by the thinnest thread of mercy. By midday, the snow had softened. Ethan's wound throbbed, but he kept moving, the wolves scouting ahead. When they reached the cabin, a weathered structure half buried in snow, relief washed over him. Smoke stains on the stones told of long winters survived here before. Inside, Ethan built a fire, the wolves curling at his feet, their breathing steady and calm. He watched the flames, exhaustion threatening to claim him. But even as safety settled around them, Ethan knew their ordeal was far from over. Enemy patrols would be searching. His wound could worsen at any time. And in this fragile shelter, trust was all they had left. That night, as snow drifted down and firelight danced on the cabin walls, the dark wolf slipped outside. In the hush, its lonely howl rose to the stars, a call for family or for help, echoing through the wild. Ethan listened, understanding at last. Survival meant saving each other again and again, no matter what darkness pressed at the door. The cabin creaked with old memories, its wooden beams groaning under the weight of snow. Ethan propped himself by the small window, peering through frosted glass for any sign of movement. The wolves moved about quietly, the silver one never straying far, the darker wolf slipping in and out, always on alert. Outside, the wind rattled branches and filled the world with the white hush of winter. Inside, Ethan's thoughts wandered between past and present. He remembered the wolf pup he'd rescued, small, terrified, its paw mangled in a steel trap. He'd broken the rules that day, risking discipline to save a life most would have left behind. "Maybe I was saving myself too," he murmured, as the silver wolf rested its head on his knee, eyes wise and steady. His wound throbbed, swollen, feverish. The adrenaline that had fueled him was running thin. He used melted snow and old rags to clean it as best he could, but he knew infection was setting in. He was weak, shivering, hunger gnawing at his gut. The wolves seemed to sense his distress. The Dark One returned with a chunk of frozen meat, a scavenged rabbit or leftover from a lynx's kill. Ethan forced himself to eat, sharing what he could with his silent companions. As night fell, a storm swept in, thickening the dark and burying the world outside in drifting snow. The wind howled like a chorus of lost souls. For hours, Ethan drifted in and out of fevered sleep, haunted by memories of war, the faces of fallen friends, and the strange, unbreakable bond that now tied him to these wild creatures. Sometime after midnight, a scraping sound jolted him awake. The silver wolf was at the door, body rigid. The dark wolf circled, ears flat, teeth bared. A faint, desperate knock sounded. 1, 2, 3 times. Ethan crawled to the door and unlatched it, bracing himself against the cold. A figure stumbled in, a young shepherd, face white with fear, clutching a radio. "They're coming," he gasped. "Soldiers, 2 patrols. They found your trail. I heard them on the radio. You have to go." Ethan's heart pounded. "Why warn me?" The boy's eyes flicked to the wolves. "You helped my family last spring, when my little brother was lost. You found him. And the wolf." It came back to Ethan in a rush. A search party, a frightened child, a flash of silver fur guiding the way. Mercy paid forward, now returned when he needed it most. "We'll go," Ethan promised. "Thank you." The shepherd pressed a worn compass into his hand. "Head north. There's a cave above the river. No one goes there. Too many old stories. You can hide until help comes." The boy left as quickly as he'd come, swallowed by the blizzard. Ethan turned to the wolves. "Looks like we're running again, friends." He gathered his few supplies, wrapping his leg as tightly as he could. The wolves moved to the door, ears up, ready. For a moment, Ethan hesitated. He knelt, placing his palm on the silver wolf's head. "I wouldn't have made it without you," he whispered. "You know that, don't you?" The wolf nuzzled his hand, a quiet confirmation. The 3 of them slipped into the storm, leaving the safety of the cabin behind. Snow blinded and battered them, but the wolves led the way, nose to the ground, finding paths no map could show. As they neared the river gorge, Ethan's strength waned. The wolves supported him, flanking him as he staggered through drifts. At last, they reached the cave, a hollow of stone where the wind could not reach. Ethan collapsed by the entrance, barely conscious, his breath ragged. The wolves pressed close, their warmth the only barrier against the killing cold. For hours, Ethan drifted, caught between fever and reality. Sometimes he heard voices, the shepherds, the soldiers, his own daughter calling from some distant dream. But always, there was the steady heartbeat of the wolves at his side, grounding him in the present. As dawn broke, weak and pale, Ethan awoke to find the wolves staring out into the new day, their bodies shielding him from harm. But in the silence after the storm, distant shouts and the rumble of engines echoed across the gorge. The enemy was near. Ethan, barely able to stand, knew it would take more than luck to survive what was coming. He looked to the wolves, wondering if the bond they shared could outlast even this final trial. Ethan forced himself upright, biting back a groan as pain flared through his leg. The wolves stood alert, every muscle taut as the enemy drew nearer, shouts bouncing off icy stone, engines idling in the forest below. In the first grey light of dawn, Ethan realized the cave's mouth faced a steep drop, with only a narrow ledge offering a way out. He had minutes at most. The wolves seemed to know it too. The dark wolf vanished into the undergrowth, her movements soundless, melting into shadow. The silver wolf pressed close to Ethan, nudging him gently toward the back of the cave, where the roof sloped down into gloom. Ethan followed, every step a struggle, his breaths ragged with effort and dread. Suddenly, Voices boomed just outside. "I see tracks, 3 sets, 1 human. They're close. Move in." Ethan's heart hammered. The silver wolf darted forward, blocking the entrance with its body, snarling, teeth bared, eyes wild and unyielding. A rifle muzzle appeared, glinting in the dawn. A soldier's silhouette filled the opening, wary but determined. For one breathless instant, man and wolf faced each other in perfect stillness. Then the soldier raised his weapon. Before he could fire, the dark wolf leapt from above, slamming into the man's shoulder and sending him sprawling into the snow. The rifle discharged, shattering stone barretiras, but the wolves gave him no time to recover. The silver wolf snapped at his arm, knocking the weapon aside, while the dark wolf snarled at the entrance, fangs bared at the squad advancing behind. "Stay back!" Ethan shouted, voice echoing off the stone. Gunshots rang out, bullets tearing through the morning air. The wolves dodged, harrying the attackers, forcing them to take cover. Ethan grabbed a fallen branch, wielding it as a club. Desperation lent him strength. The firefight was chaos, men shouting, wolves howling, Ethan swinging wildly. More soldiers spilled into the clearing, slipping on ice, tripping over each other. The wolves fought not to kill but to buy time, darting in and out, biting at boots and wrists, driving the men back from the cave's mouth. Ethan, dizzy with pain and adrenaline, locked eyes with the silver wolf. In that moment, something passed between them. A wordless understanding, a final act of trust. He turned and scrambled for the narrow ledge, the only way out. The silver wolf followed, guiding him along the treacherous path. Behind them, the dark wolf snapped at heels, buying precious seconds. The ledge was slick, barely wide enough for a man. Ethan hugged the rock, inching sideways, the wolf beside him. Below, the river roared, an impossible drop, but the only hope. A bullet ricocheted off the stone above Ethan's head. He slipped, nearly plunging into the gorge, but the wolf lunged, grabbing his coat and hauling him upright with a strength born of desperation. At last, they reached a narrow outcrop, sheltered from view. Ethan collapsed, clutching the wolf's neck as gunfire echoed above. The dark wolf darted after them, limping but unbowed. In the chaos, the enemy squad split up, searching the forest and caves, their shouts fading as they lost the trail. For the first time in days, Ethan felt the hope of escape. He clung to the wolves, grateful and awed, his mind swimming with exhaustion and wonder. They crept along the river's edge, weaving through brush and fallen logs. The wolves scouted ahead, always returning to guide Ethan past danger. When the sounds of pursuit finally faded, Ethan slumped to the ground, his strength spent, tears of relief and gratitude streaking his cheeks. He stroked the wolf's fur, voice hoarse. "I owe you my life. Again. You saved me when no one else could." The silver wolf gazed at him, eyes full of memory. The dark wolf licked his hand, tail wagging weakly. As the sun rose, painting the world gold, Ethan knew that the bond they shared, the debt written in blood and mercy, had been repaid 100 times over, but their journey was not yet finished. The mountains still stretched ahead, wild and perilous, and every step would test the limits of courage, loyalty, and hope. But as Ethan staggered to his feet, following the wolves deeper into the wild, a distant helicopter's blades thundered overhead. A search party at last. Would they bring rescue, or more danger? And would the wolves risk exposure once again to protect the man who had become part of their pack? The thunder of helicopter blades shattered the stillness, echoing off cliffs and sending flocks of birds spiraling into the sky. Ethan looked up, shielding his eyes against the morning glare. Through dizzy exhaustion, he recognized the color of the search and rescue chopper, a beacon of hope, but also a new threat to the fragile peace he and the wolves had built. The silver wolf pressed low to the ground, ears flattened, every muscle taut with uncertainty. The dark wolf circled, eyes wary, scanning the forest as the chopper swept in a wide arc above the gorge. Ethan raised a trembling hand, trying to wave, but quickly lowered it, realizing the wolves' safety would vanish if they were seen together. He crouched in the brush, torn between hope for his own rescue and dread of what might happen to his companions. The wolves had saved him again and again, risking their lives without question, but in the eyes of the world they would always be wild, always suspect. The chopper's loudspeaker crackled, "Captain Cole, this is Lieutenant Ramirez. If you can hear us, signal now." Ethan hesitated, caught in the impossible choice. If he revealed himself, the wolves might be hunted, captured, or driven off. If he hid, he might die of infection before help could reach him. The wolves pressed closer, as if sensing his turmoil. Finally, Ethan grabbed a fallen branch and spelled out S-O-S in the snow, far enough from where the wolves hid to protect them. Then, with a last glance at his companions, he limped into the open, raising his arms above his head. Within minutes, the chopper landed in a clearing. Medics rushed out, shouting his name, and helped Ethan to the ground. He gasped out, "Wolves! Don't hurt them! They saved me! Please!" Lieutenant Ramirez knelt at his side. "Wolves? Are you sure? Where are they?" Ethan's vision swam. "Trust me, they're not a threat. Let them go." The medics stabilized his leg and bundled him into the chopper. As the doors closed, Ethan caught a glimpse of the silver and dark wolves watching from the trees, silent, unblinking, wild as ever. Their eyes met for a heartbeat, a farewell heavy with gratitude and sorrow. The chopper lifted off, blades whipping the snow below. Ethan pressed his forehead to the window, willing the crew to see what he saw. Not monsters, but guardians. Back at the rescue base, Ethan drifted in and out of consciousness. He was treated for infection, dehydration, and blood loss. Doctors called it a miracle he'd survived. The story spread quickly. An officer saved against all odds, found alone in the wild, alive thanks to animal instinct and sheer luck. But Ethan insisted on the truth. "The wolves rescued me," they remembered. 10 years ago, I saved one. It saved me back. They protected me from enemy patrols, brought me food, gave me shelter. Some listened, some scoffed. The media seized on the legend, Captain Cole's guardian wolves, but most dismissed it as the fevered dreams of a wounded man. Still, there were a few who believed the young shepherd whose brother Ethan had helped, the old wildlife ranger who'd once glimpsed a silver pup near the ridge, the biologist who'd spent her life trying to prove that wildness and kindness could coexist. Days later, once Ethan could stand, Ramirez brought him to the window. The mountains stretched blue and endless under a cold sun. "We sent a team to the gorge," Ramirez said softly. "No sign of wolves. But we found your prints, your makeshift bandages, and this." He handed Ethan a battered compass, the one the shepherd boy had given him. Ethan smiled, tears pricking his eyes. "They're alive," he whispered. "They made it." He knew, deep down, that the wolves would vanish into the forest, as mysterious and brave as ever. Their bond was not broken. It had only changed. From that day on, Ethan would tell their story, of debts repaid, trust earned, and wild mercy that defied every expectation. But as Ethan left the hospital, news broke that a nearby village had lost livestock to wolves, silver and dark, moving together, as if on a mission. Old fears returned, and rumors of a soldier's pack spread like wildfire. Would the world remember the truth, or would the next chapter be written in fear instead of hope? Ethan returned to civilian life a changed man, haunted, grateful, restless. His leg healed slowly, but his nights were filled with dreams of snow, firelight, and yellow eyes glowing in the dark. The world wanted a hero's tale, soldier survives alone in wolf country. But Ethan refused to let the truth be twisted into legend or nightmare. He traveled to the nearby village, the one now caught in a fever of rumors and fear. Ranchers gathered at the tavern, angry and anxious, demanding answers from wildlife officers and each other. "They took 2 goats last night. What happens when it's our kids?" "It's that pack, the silver one and her mate. Someone said they follow a man, a foreigner." Ethan stood up and silencing the room. "It's true. I survived because of those wolves. They're not monsters. They saved my life." Skeptical eyes narrowed. One old man spat into the fire. "A wolf's a wolf. They remember hunger, not kindness." But Ethan pressed on, telling his story in detail. He described the first rescue, the injured pup, the impossible reunion a decade later. He explained how the wolves had risked their lives, how they'd hunted only when desperate, how mercy had saved them all. Some scoffed, but the shepherd boy from the mountain, now older and braver, stood beside Ethan. "He's telling the truth. My brother would be dead if not for the silver wolf. They're different. They remember who helps them." The biologist spoke too, showing photos of paw prints, hair samples, and proof that the soldiers' pack was unique, bonded, cautious, avoiding humans unless in dire need. The debate raged through the night, villagers torn between fear and hope. In the end, the mayor called for a vote. Would the wolves be hunted or protected? The town split nearly down the middle. But in a surprising twist, the women and children, those who'd been comforted by the story, inspired by the boy's rescue, spoke up. "We want our children to know what mercy looks like," the mayor's wife said. "Let's try coexistence, not more blood." The decision was made, a trial period of protection, under the watchful eyes of rangers and local volunteers. Ranchers received new fencing and guard dogs, paid for by a fund started by Ethan himself. The biologist arranged to monitor the pack, promising to intervene if things turned dire. Ethan stayed in the village, helping rebuild trust between people and between the wild and those who feared it. He visited schools, telling children about the power of compassion, the wisdom of remembering debts, and the strength in standing up for what's right. But not everyone was convinced. A small group of hunters plotted in secret, determined to end the problem before it grew. Ethan knew their hearts would be hard to change, but he refused to let fear write the final chapter. One evening, the silver wolf appeared on the ridge above the village, the dark wolf at her side. They watched the lights from a distance, silent as ghosts. Ethan saw them from his window and stepped outside, raising a hand in greeting. The wolves paused, then melted into the forest, leaving only their tracks behind. But in that moment, Ethan knew their story was not finished. There would always be risks, misunderstandings, losses, and hard choices. Yet, for the first time in years, the wild and the village shared a fragile peace, built on trust and memory instead of fear. As spring approached, the biologist arrived with news. A new litter had been spotted, small tracks following the silver and dark wolves through melting snow. "A new generation," she whispered. But would they inherit a world of hope or one of old grudges? Spring came to the mountains in a rush of color, snowmelt tumbling down gullies, green bursting from every branch, wildflowers painting the meadows where silence had once reigned. For the village, hope grew quietly alongside these changes. There were fewer lost animals, fewer arguments at the tavern, fences held, and the wolves kept their distance. But for Ethan, life had changed forever. He spent his days repairing outbuildings, helping with flocks, and answering children's questions about the wolves. The biologist stayed close. Her research now focused on the family of wolves roaming the valley, the silver wolf, the dark wolf, and soon, 4 tiny cubs tumbling from the den at dusk. The first time Ethan saw them, he felt an ache so deep it brought tears to his eyes. The silver wolf, her fur gleaming in the sun, stood guard as her cubs tumbled and played. The dark wolf watching from the edge of the meadow, never far away. "It's a miracle," the biologist whispered, jotting notes with trembling hands. "You rarely see a wild pack so close to people, so cautious yet so willing to trust." Ethan smiled, but worry gnawed at him. Not everyone in the village had softened. Rumors of secret meetings reached his ears. A few livestock losses, coyotes, not wolves, he suspected, were blamed on the pack. Old suspicions never truly died. One evening, Ethan found a note nailed to his door. "If you care so much for your wolves, keep them away from our land. One more attack, and we deal with them ourselves." He brought the letter to the mayor, who sighed heavily. "It's a small group, but they're loud. We'll keep the rangers alert. Just be careful." The biologist took precautions, fitting the wolves with lightweight tracking collars and enlisting Ethan and a few trusted villagers to check on them regularly. She spoke at town meetings, sharing footage of the cubs and evidence that the pack mostly hunted deer and avoided farms. But as spring wore on, tensions simmered. One night, the silver wolf appeared at Ethan's fence, anxious and restless. He followed her through the moonlit fields, heart pounding. until they reached the den. There, he found the biologist tending to an injured cub, its leg caught in a rusty snare left by an old poacher. Together, they freed the frightened pup, cleaned the wound, and stayed with the wolves until dawn. The pack watched, trusting, as if they understood Ethan's intentions completely. The next day, word of the rescue spread. More villagers came to see the wolves from afar, some leaving offerings of food and thanks. Schoolchildren drew pictures of the cubs and pasted them on the walls of the community center. Yet, danger was never far. That same night, a gunshot echoed through the hills. Ethan and the rangers rushed to the meadow, but the wolves had vanished into the trees, safe but shaken. The incident hardened resolve on both sides. Some demanded the wolves be relocated, others argued for stronger protection. Ethan stood at every meeting, telling the story of the rescue, the cubs, and the debt that tied his fate to the wild pack's survival. Slowly, the village leaned toward hope. Fences were strengthened, compensation funds for livestock losses grew, and more people volunteered to patrol the woods, not to hunt, but to watch and protect. One dusk, as the wolves led their cubs through the safety of shadowed trees, Ethan stood alone at the edge of the forest. The silver wolf paused, locking eyes with him, a silent bond passing between them. Her cubs, bold and bright-eyed, tumbled at her feet. He understood in that moment that peace would always be fragile. But it was possible, so long as trust and vigilance held. As thunder rolled over the mountains and rain fell in sheets, Ethan received a call from the biologist. A stranger was seen setting traps near the old den. We need to act now. With the wolves' future hanging by a thread, Ethan realized the greatest test of trust and courage was yet to come. Lightning forked across the sky, illuminating the valley in ghostly blue as Ethan and the biologist raced through the storm. Rain soaked their clothes and turned the trails to mud, but they pressed on, following the GPS signal from the wolves' collars. Every minute mattered. One wrong step, and a snare could end what generations had fought to preserve. The forest felt haunted. Every shadow seemed to move, every gust of wind carried the scent of danger. Somewhere ahead, the silver wolf led her pack to safety, her instincts sharpened by years of hardship. The dark wolf guarded the rear, teeth bared at every unfamiliar sound. As Ethan and the biologist neared the old den, a lantern flickered among the trees, a stranger's silhouette hunched over a trap. Ethan recognized him, an outsider who'd come through town asking questions, a man with old grudges and no love for wild things. "Stop!" Ethan shouted, voice lost in the rain. "You're trespassing! Leave those animals alone!" The stranger spun, gun gleaming in the lantern light. "Stay back. They're just wolves. It's them or our herds." The biologist stepped forward, hands raised. "There are better ways. Coexistence works. Let us show you." But the man was desperate. His fear twisted into anger. He advanced, waving the pistol wildly. Suddenly, a shape darted from the darkness. The dark wolf, silent as night, leaping between Ethan and the stranger. The man fired, the shot cracking like thunder, but the wolf dodged, growling, holding him at bay. Ethan didn't hesitate. He lunged, tackling the man to the ground. They struggled in the mud, rain blinding, fists and fear clashing, until the biologist wrenched the gun away and kicked it aside. The stranger lay still, breath ragged, eyes wide with shock. The wolves circled, not attacking, but standing guard over their human allies. Ethan caught his breath, heart pounding. "You see? They don't want to fight. They want to survive, just like us." The stranger stared at the wolves, seeing not monsters but beings protecting their own. The rain softened, the storm's fury spent. Rangers arrived, summoned by the biologist's emergency call. They arrested the man, confiscated the traps, and led him away. In the quiet aftermath, Ethan knelt beside the dark wolf, who licked his hand, tail thumping weakly. The silver wolf approached, cubs safe at her side, eyes fixed on Ethan with a gratitude deeper than words. The rangers promised more patrols, and the mayor called an emergency meeting. The story of the night's events spread quickly, sparking fierce debate, but also unexpected unity. Old rivalries faded as more villagers shared stories of lost livestock and lost children, of risks taken and debts repaid. Ethan spoke at the gathering, his voice steady. We all choose what kind of world we leave behind for our children and for the wild. These wolves saved me. We can choose trust, or we can choose fear. The room was silent. Then slowly, applause broke out. The biologist smiled, hope shining in her eyes. In the following days, the village set new rules: no hunting within the sanctuary, compensation for losses, and a promise to teach the next generation what it meant to care for the land and its wild creatures. Cameras and signs were posted at the sanctuary's border, not to threaten, but to remind everyone that peace was hard-won and always fragile. Ethan walked the woods each evening, the silver wolf sometimes appearing beside him, the cubs bounding at her heels. He knew dangers would always return: storms, poachers, fear itself. But for now, trust held. And sometimes, as dusk deepened and the village lights flickered on, Ethan would hear the wolves' howls, a chorus that rose and fell with the wind, singing not just of survival, but of a future both wild and free. But as the first leaves of autumn fell, the biologist brought news from the rangers. There's talk of opening more land to hunting, pressure from outside. If we don't share our story, all we've built could be lost. Ethan knew the fight for the wolves and the meaning of their bond was about to enter its most critical chapter yet. As autumn deepened, the valley blazed gold and red, but anxiety crept back into the village. Letters arrived from regional authorities, proposals to open sanctuary land to hunting, citing overpopulation and community safety. The hard-won peace seemed ready to shatter under political pressure from distant cities that saw only numbers, not lives. The mayor called another meeting, the hall packed with villagers, ranchers, teachers, and children clutching drawings of the wolves. Ethan stood at the front with the biologist and the shepherd boy, now a teenager, who had once been saved by the very wolves at risk. Arguments erupted. "We've done enough. We can't risk another bad season. The wolves stay. They're the reason our kids are safe, our fields are healthy. If the city wants to hunt, let them come. Look these animals in the eye." The biologist showed data from the trackers. Wolves hunted mostly deer, keeping herds healthy and lowering crop damage. Footage played of the cubs growing strong, of Ethan and the shepherd boy tending the injured pup, of the pack guiding lost children home. Ethan spoke from the heart. "A decade ago, I saved a wolf's life and it saved mine. That debt runs deeper than politics. These animals are family to this land. If we turn our backs now, we'll lose more than just wolves. We'll lose what makes this valley home." The crowd quieted, the words sinking in. For the first time, representatives from the city sat among them, invited by the biologist to see the village firsthand. They watched as children described their favorite wolves, as ranchers admitted the losses they'd suffered had been fewer since the pack returned, as the mayor spoke about the pride the sanctuary brought. The meeting ended in a fragile truce. The city officials agreed to a tour of the sanctuary, guided by Ethan and the biologist. They walked the boundary lines, watched the wolves from afar, saw the cubs tumble in the leaves. A journalist captured the moment the silver wolf, wise, scarred, proud, paused on a ridge. Her cubs gathered at her feet and watched the humans below. That photo ran in newspapers nationwide, alongside Ethan's story. Letters poured in. Children, scientists, even lawmakers inspired by the tale of the soldier and the wolves. Pressure mounted not to weaken protection, but to expand it. Still, not everyone was convinced. That week, someone sabotaged a section of fencing, letting sheep wander near the wolves' territory. When 2 lambs vanished, blame flared instantly, old hatreds rekindled. The biologist proved, with tracks and camera footage, that coyotes had taken the animals, not the pack. The real threat, she argued, was not wildness, but fear. Ethan visited every house, listening to frustrations, sharing stories of resilience and the good the wolves had done. The shepherd boy and his friends joined him, rallying support from younger villagers. At the next meeting, a vote was held. Should the sanctuary's protections remain? The count was close, but hope edged out fear. The valley chose to protect its wolves. The city officials left with a new perspective and a promise to advocate for the village in the capital. That night, as wind rattled the eaves and leaves danced down the streets, Ethan sat on his porch, listening. In the distance, the silver wolf howled, her song carrying across the hills. The cubs answered one after another, the sound swelling, a chorus of gratitude, courage, and the untamed promise that had changed the valley forever. But as the wolves' song faded, a message arrived from the capital. A National Wildlife Forum is being called. Ethan, the biologist, and the mayor are invited to speak. The future of all wild sanctuaries may depend on what you say. For Ethan, it was clear the next battle would not be fought with claws or fear, but with truth and hope before the eyes of a nation. Winter's first chills swept through the valley as Ethan, the biologist, and the mayor prepared for the journey to the capital. The entire village gathered at dawn to see them off. Farmers, children, the shepherd boy and his family, all wishing them luck. The silver wolf watched from the tree line, her coat luminous in the weak sun, the cubs tucked safely at her side. For a heartbeat, Ethan thought he saw understanding in her eyes. Go, speak for us. The train ride to the capital was long and anxious. The biologist organized data and photographs, while the mayor rehearsed the community's story. Ethan stared out the window, remembering every risk, every mercy, every howl in the darkness that had saved a life. His, the shepherd boys, the cubs, and in some way, the entire village's soul. The National Wildlife Forum was held in a towering glass building, filled with officials, scientists, conservationists, and media from across the country. The stakes were high. Proposals to roll back protections for wild sanctuaries hung in the balance, opposed by some who saw only threats, not the hidden bonds between wildness and community. Their panel began with the biologist. She spoke of the valley's transformation, how wolf predation had balanced deer herds, restored native plants, and taught new generations to respect the wild. She played videos of the pack, the silver wolf guiding her cubs, the dark wolf defending the village children, the moments of trust that had bridged worlds. The mayor told the story of a divided community made whole, of people learning to coexist with the wild rather than conquering it. He read letters from schoolchildren, describing what it meant to live alongside wolves, not with fear, but with pride and gratitude. Then Ethan stood, his voice quiet but steady. I am alive today because I chose mercy, and because wildness chose mercy for me. That debt has shaped my life. These wolves saved not just me, but my friends, our children, and the land itself. Our story proves that trust can turn enemies into family. He spoke of that first night, of a wounded soldier and a silver pup, of debts repaid in the snow. He described the wolves' courage, their loyalty, the hard choices of every villager who chose coexistence over cruelty. He ended with a promise: if we can do it, any community can. The wild is not our enemy, it is our teacher. The audience was silent, many moved to tears. Some officials, at first unmoved, began to reconsider. The children's letters were read aloud. Calls flooded in from across the country, and even the most skeptical lawmakers asked to visit the valley themselves. That night in their hotel, Ethan and the biologist watched news reports. Sanctuary's fate hinges on villagers' courage. Former soldier makes plea for wild trust. Children lead the charge to protect wolves. The forum's final vote came the next morning. With the world watching, the assembly voted not only to protect the valley, but to expand wild sanctuaries nationwide, with new funding for coexistence and education. Ethan phoned the mayor, his voice thick with emotion. We did it, not just for us, but for everyone who shares their home with the wild. Back in the valley, news of the victory swept through the village. Bells rang, children cheered, and even old skeptics raised a glass in gratitude. The wolves howled that night, their song wilder and more joyful than ever, echoing from ridge to ridge. Ethan returned home to a hero's welcome, but he slipped away as dusk fell, walking to the edge of the forest. The silver wolf and her family waited in the shadows. Ethan knelt, whispering thanks. Their eyes met, wild and knowing, both changed by what they'd endured. And as the wolves vanished into the woods, Ethan understood. The fight for coexistence would never truly end, but now hope would always have a voice. Weeks later, the biologist arrived at Ethan's door, eyes bright with excitement. There's talk of an international summit. Your story, our valley. could inspire the world. Ethan smiled, glancing at the forest where wolves watched and waited. Their journey, he realized, was just beginning, with the wild beside them at every step. The winter that followed was unlike any before. News of the valley's victory and Ethan's story reverberated across continents, shared in classrooms, retold by journalists, debated in parliament halls and campfires alike. Where once wolves had been a shadow of fear, they now became a symbol of possibility, a living testament to what courage and compassion could achieve. The invitation to the international summit arrived in a flurry of official letters and phone calls. Delegates from dozens of countries gathered in a mountain city, each with their own struggles between wildness and safety, tradition and renewal. Ethan, the biologist, and the mayor traveled together, representing not just a single village, but the idea that no place was too small to change the world. At the summit, stories from all corners of the globe echoed through vast chambers. Some told of disastrous hunts and lost species. Others spoke of hard-won peace, of farmers and elephants living side by side, of tigers whose survival meant water for entire cities. Yet it was Ethan's story, of a soldier and a wolf, a debt paid in snow and trust, that seemed to capture every heart. He spoke of nights in the wilderness, of choices made in fear and hope. Every one of us is called, sooner or later, to choose mercy over instinct, trust over fear. I was saved by a wolf whose life I'd saved years before. We each carry the wild inside us. When we honor it, in animals, in ourselves, we all grow stronger. The biologist presented the science, data showing the benefits of apex predators, footage of healthy ecosystems, evidence that sanctuaries did more than save animals. They saved cultures, economies, and futures. The mayor shared the practical lessons, how to mediate disputes, build trust, turn skeptics into allies. He described the transformation of their valley, not as a miracle, but as a series of stubborn choices made by teachers, mothers, even former rivals. When the summit ended, world leaders announced a new international pact: funding for wild corridors, scholarships for coexistence research, protection for critical habitats across borders. The Valley Protocol, as it became known, took root in law and in legend. Back home, the village celebrated. Children performed plays reenacting the rescue, the wolves' loyalty, and the courage it took to stand up for what was right. The biologist's office overflowed with letters, some skeptical, most full of hope. Tourists and scientists visited, eager to learn. The wolves themselves thrived. The silver wolf led her pack across the sanctuary's breadth, her cubs growing strong, the dark wolf always near. Sometimes at dusk, Ethan would see them watching from the tree line, older now but still wild and free. Ethan kept a journal, recording every new challenge and small victory. He wrote to soldiers still serving in distant places, urging them to remember that mercy mattered. He mentored children, teaching them to track, to listen, to respect even the lives they didn't understand. And always, as the moon rose above the snow-clad peaks, the wolves howled, a call that rang not with loneliness, but with belonging. Their story had started as a whisper between a lost man and a wounded pup. Now, it was a song carried on the wind from one end of the earth to the other. In the end, Ethan realized the real rescue was not just survival, it was the healing of a wound, the one between humanity and the wild, between past fears and new futures. On the anniversary of his rescue, Ethan hiked alone to the old cave, leaving a scrap of cloth and a circle of stones as a sign of thanks. As he turned to leave, he glimpsed movement, new wolf tracks in fresh snow, smaller than the rest. A new pup, curious and unafraid, watched him from the shadows. The cycle, Ethan understood, had begun again. What would the next chapter bring? Years passed, and the valley flourished as a sanctuary of hope and wild harmony. What began as a desperate fight for survival grew into a symbol of what trust, courage, and compassion could achieve. The boy who became a soldier, and the wolf he saved and who saved him in return, inspired generations to listen to the wild, to each other, and to the promises made in moments of kindness. The sanctuary's success sparked movements worldwide. Schools taught coexistence, Communities funded wildlife corridors, laws protected habitats once threatened. Stories of the soldier and the wolf were told around campfires and classrooms alike, reminding us all that true strength lies not in domination, but in respect and reciprocity. Ethan, now a quiet leader and voice for the wild, continued his mission, knowing that every effort counted. He often returned to the mountains, walking paths once trod with pain and fear, now vibrant with life. He would pause, eyes searching the trees, ears tuned for that familiar howl. The call of a friend who had changed everything. The silver wolf, the dark wolf, and their growing pack thrived under the protection of a community transformed. Their howls rang out as a blessing, a reminder that bonds forged in trust can bridge the divide between worlds. And as the sun set behind the peaks, Ethan understood. The story was never just about survival. It was about healing, of lands, lives, and the unbreakable promise that kindness, once given, returns in ways we can scarcely imagine. If this story moved you, please share it to spread the message of hope, courage, and coexistence. Subscribe to hear more true stories of the wild and the people who dare to protect it. Thank you for watching, and thank you for believing in the wild within us all.